Hi everyone, and welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. So yesterday I put up a 6 or 7 minute clip giving my answer, which was my answer to the question about can a Scientologist believe in God? Do Scientologists believe in God? It was an excerpt from an interview, one of the 1-hour interviews that I did with Mike Rinder. So today I'm uploading a 25-minute segment that starts with Mike's answer to that exact same question. We then also discuss what a Scientology Sunday service is and why they're done. We discuss Louis Farrakhan and his involvement in Scientology and how this relates to whether a Scientologist can in fact believe in God. We talk about Reverend Alfredi Johnson, who's a Black Baptist minister who's been in Scientology for probably close to 20 years now, and how his involvement relates to whether a Scientologist can believe in God. We sort of touch on Black Americans in Scientology and David Miscavige's inadvertent racism. Funny example of that in the video. And then the end of the clip is also a rehash of my 5 or 6 minute answer to that question. So without any further ado, here's the video. Enjoy.
All right, let's go on to the next one. Oh, this is a good one. What were you taught to think about other religions and God? Some of the bullet points here. Does God exist? Do other religions have value? Are other religions real or valid? Can a Scientologist really also be a Christian or be Jewish, etc., and practice those religions and be a Scientologist? And also, why does the church claim that you can be a Scientologist and be an active practicing member of other religions? So let's start with just what were you taught to believe about God in Scientology?
Not much.
Okay.
I mean, seriously,
Right.
that question is sort of a, what are you taught to believe? You're taught to believe that you should figure it out for yourself.
Okay.
That's basic. That is basic. That is the fundamental teaching of Scientology. Figure it out for yourself. And the way that you will figure it out for yourself is if you do enough Scientology that you will attain an enlightened enough state that you will be able to come to your own realization about what God is or what God does or what the meaning even of the or what the concept is. And there is a lot of yammer that goes on, kind of the sort of we don't really want to say this out loud kind of stuff about, is everything all just one big Thetan? Are we all little bits of some greater whole? Is there some secret thing? And, I think people that haven't done the OT levels think that there is some big secrets contained in the OT levels that are going to, reveal this. Like,
The
8th
secret of the
dynamic, OT8. So therefore, on OT8, where it's truth revealed, you're going to find out all about God and, the ultimate answers to all questions or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, God is in Scientology, like a lot of the other religious trappings of Scientology, God is a bit of a joke. It's a bit of we need to have God mentioned somewhere, because how can you be a religion if there's no God at all? Mm-hmm. And, there are religions that don't really have God. Buddhism doesn't really have God per se, other than yourself, kind of, I guess. But to meet with or to fulfill what is considered to be a religion at least in Judeo-Christian society, or even whatever that word is, however you say it, Abrahamic or Abrahamic, I don't know, parts of the world, you have to have God. So Scientology has God mentioned.
Sure. But, okay, good. Now, real quick, I want to just define some terms. You mentioned the 8th dynamic. In Scientology, part of the core teachings is that you can take life and divide it up into 8 units, and they call the units the dynamic. So The first unit is yourself. The second unit is family. I'm sorry, the first dynamic is self. The second dynamic is family. The third dynamic is any group. The fourth dynamic is all mankind. The fifth dynamic is plant and animal life. The sixth dynamic is the physical universe. The seventh dynamic is basically supposed to be spirits or spirituality, and the eighth dynamic is supposed to be the God dynamic. And he never says this means there is a God, but this is the portion of life that people devote to maybe even just asking the question, is there a God? And whichever God you believe in, it falls into the eighth dynamic. So you were talking about the fact that because the eighth dynamic also happens to coincide with OT8, that maybe some people would have that idea that there's something revealed. Also, OT8 is called the truth revealed. Okay, so that's where you're going with that. Now, when you mentioned God is mentioned, within the last 15 years or so, Scientology came out with basically a big fat booklet of Sunday sermons, and churches all of a sudden started to do.
I put that together.
I knew you were going to say that. Churches all of a sudden had to start all scheduling a Sunday service right after lunch, and there's things in those sermons that use the word God. The Scientology marriage ceremony, I think, mentions the word God, but I remember, and I might be jumping ahead a bit on answering my questions here, having to sit in those Sunday services was always a little embarrassing because here, first of all, most of the people in those Sunday services were all staff members, and we all truly understood Scientology. We weren't new public who had been bullshitted into getting into Scientology.
Right.
So we're all kind of sitting around sort of uncomfortably kind of staring at each other like, we've got to pretend to be doing this bullshit now? Like, who are we kidding? Why are we doing this? Like, we don't do Sunday service. That's not what Scientology is about. We don't do God. That's not what Scientology is about. So something like we all sit around and had to kid each other because David Miscavige decided that in order to make sure the IRS didn't take away the tax exemption, we had to pretend to do Sunday services for a couple of years.
That's exactly right.
That is exactly what happened, isn't it?
That's exactly what happened.
And you know what? Your normal org has probably stopped doing Sunday services.
Oh, I'm sure. Unless someone's beating on them, it's a complete waste of time.
Right.
You know, like I said, there is mention of God, you know, no agency short of God in these very, in like the creed of the church, and these things that are written for the purpose of being a grand statement.
Right.
But in the usual day-to-day run-of-the-mill activities of Scientology,
Yeah.
there's no prayers. I mean, and there's even a made-up prayer, you know, the prayer for something or other. I can't even remember what it's called, you know, prayer for the good of the world or some thing that was written by someone in the Guardian's office to have a prayer. So there is a prayer that can be said at Sunday service.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what it's about.
Right.
And as for the stuff about you can be any religion and be a Scientologist, yeah, right. That is a line that gets used to help handle scaredy cats. The people that are afraid that something of value to them is going to be taken away from them by something that they don't really know and understand yet. So they're told, it's okay, you can continue to be a Christian, you can continue to be a Jew, you can continue to be a Buddhist, you can be anything, as long as it's not a psych, and still be a Scientologist. But the truth of the matter is, as soon as you get to the first issue that is in the front of every course in Scientology, except for the introductory courses, the issue called Keeping Scientology Working, it tells you that there is no other path. There is nothing other than Scientology. Everything else is a waste of time and leading you off into the abyss of unknown unhappiness and the chasms of whatever. I mean, all the terminology, and I mean, it's very, very explicitly says you're either a Scientologist or you're not. You can't be anything other than a Scientologist. You can't go practice anything else. You can't get involved in doing other things and other other practices than Scientology. It's Scientology to the exclusion of all else.
Right.
And then you get these guys that go around and say, well, I'm still Jewish. I'm a Jewish Scientologist. Yeah, they go to Jewish delis and eat tongue sandwiches. And that's about the extent of their Judaic practice.
They might celebrate Hanukkah instead of Christmas.
Oh, it's a holiday.
Right.
It's ethnic.
Right.
They are ethnically Jewish or ethnically Christian because they have Christmas and they take a vacation for Easter and whatever, and that's it. They do not believe that Jesus Christ is the salvation of mankind. They believe L. Ron Hubbard is the salvation of mankind if they really are a Scientologist.
Right. So you mentioned earlier on that the official position of Scientology is figure it out for yourself. So this might be a little redundant at this point, but was it apparent to you, did you get the sense that that was really just a cop-out so that they didn't have to overtly say there is no God? Or do you feel that Scientology does allow for a Scientologist to believe in the existence of a single supreme being?
Oh boy. I think Scientology would allow someone to believe that, but the problem with that concept is that it kind of goes a bit contradictory to other fundamental concepts of Scientology, such as, you are the cause of your own existence, you are responsible for all things that happen to you. We were talking the other day about, a leaf falls in the forest and you have a cause over the leaf falling in the forest. And it's kind of hard to square up those concepts in Scientology with the idea that there is some single supreme author of the universe who controls everything that happens because he's the creator of the universe. I mean, for me, that's it's impossible to have those two things go together.
Right.
But on the other hand, for me, it's just as impossible for the illogics of the Christian God or the Jewish God or anybody else's God to go together with what happens in the world. I always laugh when I see the guys who come off, the quarterback that comes off after just having won the game and says, thanks to God, he was on our side. Well, what about the guy on the losing side? He might be just as devout a Christian as the winning quarterback. And what does he say? It wasn't in God's plan for me today. Well,
He works
why
in
not?
mysterious ways.
Anyway, I don't even want to get into that discussion or debate because it's such a touchy subject.
Right.
But honestly, I think that it is sort of a cop-out, and I don't think that it squares the concept of a single, all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the universe squares well with the Scientological concepts of responsibility, and you create your own reactive mind, and you can gain enlightenment not by seeking to understand God, but by seeking to understand yourself.
Right.
Those things just don't all go together.
Right.
There's a lot of things that don't go together in Scientology.
True. So what about Reverend Alfredi Johnson? He's promoted internally in Scientology as he's a Black Baptist minister. For all Scientologists know, he's still an active Baptist minister with his own congregation. I have no idea if it's true.
Yeah, he runs it out of the World Literacy Crusade.
I know, but that's...
I'm serious.
Oh.
You go like that. He does.
But does he have a church? No, I know. But I mean a real Baptist minister with a congregation and a church, not a tutor center in Compton that he pretends is a church. Okay.
I don't know what the difference is.
No, but let me ask you, because I think you were very active in the legal, and you must have been very active doing something with Reverend Alfredi Johnson when he was getting into Scientology, and he's gone clear. He's the one that got Louis Farrakhan hooked up with Scientology. Is it even possible that, well, this goes back to the question of, does Scientology even allow for the belief in a single supreme being? Is it possible that Reverend Alfredi Johnson still genuinely believes in his Christian God and still genuinely believes in the technology of Scientology and the amazing man L. Ron Hubbard?
No, they're mutually exclusive concepts.
So, do you think he's just not really a believer anymore in Christianity, but just does it because it's great PR for the church?
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
That's what I think.
Truly. What about Louis Farrakhan?
I mean, I don't know. But
what about Louis Farrakhan? What the hell?
beats me.
It's a mystery.
It's a total mystery.
Right.
It's a total mystery.
They are not telling him the whole story.
I was just going to say, the one thing that I am certain about is Louis Farrakhan or any of his people don't get the whole picture.
Right.
They've got a bit, and it's being fed to them in a fashion that makes it acceptable, and somehow they can absorb it and use these little workable pieces of Scientology, unless they have abandoned their black Muslim religion or beliefs, they can't possibly be all in for Scientology.
It's true.
Because you can't have both.
Right.
You can't be both. You have to be one or the other.
Right.
And so they're not really Scientologists, but it's that difficult thing. So when is someone a Scientologist? When they're using the materials of L. Ron Hubbard, because that makes them a Scientologist just like anybody else. Well, that's probably true by that definition. And eventually, if they stick with it, they're going to find out that this ain't going to work.
Right.
Because you can't be a real Scientologist
Right.
without disowning and I don't know even what the word is. Disagreeing that there is anything other than Scientology as the route to spiritual freedom and spiritual enlightenment and clearing the planet and making a good society and having happy people and having a job and making a lot of money and like everything and anything across the entire gamut of life.
Right. I think David Miscavige, and jump in because you probably know better than I think he thought it was some huge success, this relationship with the Nation of Islam, because somehow he thought that was going to open the doors for Scientology into Black America. And what's laughable about that is that he would assume that Black America in any way has some fundamental identification with the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, well, I can make a bad joke, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate.
I mean, you have mentioned before that the whole, Dougie Fresh, who's an old-time, one of the original hip-hop stars, or rap stars, Dougie Fresh and Isaac Hayes were the ones who, through their sort of polite complaints why there were no Black people in Scientology, is what got David Miscavige to be like, okay, we are going to just full-blown buy and set up an org in Harlem. We're going to do it in Inglewood. We're going to try to break into Black America. But is there any truth, is there any relationship to the complaints that Dougie Fresh and Isaac Hayes would have made and this relationship with Louis Farrakhan? Or are these two these were two different paths?
I honestly don't know, Aaron. I mean, I think Alfredi Johnson was the gateway to the Nation of Islam.
Right.
And I think Alfredi Johnson is out for the good of Alfredi Johnson and all things and everything, and he saw some opportunity, who knows what it was,
right,
and ran with it. And because in truth, the DC org, for example, they probably would have closed their doors by now if it hadn't been for NOI people in there taking services.
Right.
I mean,
it's
the only place, Scientology today is getting people from like the Nation of Islam to go on course and getting SEAL members from Venezuela and rural Russia.
Right.
Because the Nation of Islam people are basically directed by their dictator that this is an acceptable thing for them to do. So they show up to do their Dianetics courses. And the people in Venezuela and rural Russia are seeing this as an opportunity that they can get something that they can't get in their own terrible states of affairs. So, you know, I can see that there is some perceived benefit to, you know, if you're in a local Scientology org and you're able to get 5 people from the Nation of Islam on course somewhere, that's like a big deal for those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they scramble after every soul that comes in the door. I mean, I was just listening to the latest podcast from, oh, now the name slipped me. Carrie and the guys that went into LA org and started on course there.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And the every description that they give is the description of like the 10 people hovering around the one poor person that's strayed in the door, and they've caught them like a fly in a spider web, and they circle around them like to make sure they don't get away. And that's what life is like in a church of Scientology. So if you get people from the Nation of Islam, they're going to come and they're going to stay because they're not going back to report into whatever the boss at the Nation of Islam is. Oh no, we didn't finish the course.
Right.
If they're told that that's what they're supposed to do, they go do it.
Right.
So they're perfect as far as Scientology because they're not going to escape.
Such a good point. So let me give my answer to this question. You know, it's funny. About a year ago, I was involved in a conversation. It was with several people, and my mom was included. And she said something to the effect of, in her whole time in Scientology, she'd never relinquished her either belief or thought or that the possibility that there was a supreme being. And at the time, I said she was lying. I called bullshit. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time since then thinking about, like, how could that be true? Like, in what way could it be possible that someone could be in Scientology for, 30 years or whatever, and still believe in a supreme being? And I guess based on some of the things that you've said, it's possible. You never sat down and told you can't believe in God. And actually what we might want to differentiate here is the difference between believing in Jesus as the Savior or any prophets or anything. There's definitely material in Scientology that says like Jesus is not real, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I'm not aware of anything that specifically says God is not real.
No, there is nothing.
But so let me explain why growing up in Scientology, it never occurred to me in a million years that there could be a God. People who believe in God, there's a dynamic there of somewhat of a subservience. If God exists, then he has a plan. People differ in their beliefs on just how much he micromanages that plan, or whether you should try.
Fourth quarter touchdown.
Or whether, because there is a God, you should even try to direct the course of your life. There's different beliefs in that. But there's still at least some level of belief. And in Scientology, there is no quarter given whatsoever to some external influence having any impact on your life. It's you. It's you. It's always been you. It'll always be you. And there's something in Scientology called is it the axioms that says in the beginning there was a decision? No, it's not the. Is it the axioms?
Factors.
The factors. I should know that. There's these I think there's 10 factors. Maybe there's 12. It's something like that. That's sort of Scientology's true spiritual origin story. And it's not really a story. It's just 10 items. In the beginning there was a decision, and the decision was to be. That was like the first factor, right?
Right.
Now someone could say, well, that decision could have been God. And you go, no, not the way the factors are written. That decision was Satan's. Collectively, whether a single unit or a multi-unit, you never really know because it's never really dictated.
Right.
But if there's a God, okay, In Scientology, it is believed, it is taught that Thetans, collectively, Theta, created the physical universe.
Correct.
But if there's a God, then God created Thetans. And Scientology never says that. It's kind of an important step. Either God created Thetans or he didn't. The way the factors are written is kind of like, no, Theta just sort of spontaneously decided to exist one day. Well, that kind of sounds like God, but it's not said that it's God. And if Scientology believed in a God, it would just be said. God created Theta.
Right.
Okay, so I guess the most important part of that answer is, to me, growing up, I always felt that anyone who believed in God also believed that God had some sort of effect on them, and Scientology does not allow for there to be a God that has an effect on you, so therefore, by extrapolation, there is no God. And that's why I was just so...
You are far too logical.
How did I stay in for so long? Okay, so that's my answer. Now,
All right, well, I hope that was helpful. And I'm still trying to perfect these end of video segments, so let me give this another shot. If you want to subscribe to this channel, click right up here. If you want to see the video I uploaded yesterday, click up here. If you want to see another random video that you most likely have not seen before, click right there. And if you want to see the full interview that this excerpt came from, click right there. All right, guys, see you later.